What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
Game on! Game on!
That's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so.
You're listening to The Review on the OSG Podcasting Network.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Review. It's the Online Sports Guys College Football Show featuring, listen to me, I can't even be grammatically correct here. Featuring us, the Online Sports Guys, in the car, Brother John at OSG Nelson, at home as in the comfort of his own studio, John Wilkerson at J Wilkerson 16, and in my home studio, it's me, OSG Phil. Guys,
so I've been on the road the last couple of podcasts, and now John, it's your turn to be on the road.
J-Dub was on the road last week.
That's right. J-Dub was on the road too, so we've kept tradition alive.
Yes.
Should we start?
Phil's turn next week.
Yeah, really?
Should we start titling these On the Road?
I think that's trademarked.
On the road again?
On the road consistently.
Yes. Guys, there's a whole lot of stuff to talk about this week in the world of college football as we have started to find out what conference plans are.
Mm-hmm.
And much like we predicted, pretty much it depends on which conference you ask. The Power 5 schools, always a little bit different plan here. What are your thoughts? I'll open it to the floor. What are your thoughts about what's been discussed here between the ACC, the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and the SEC, noting that the Big 12 still hasn't really made a commitment one way or the other?
Well, who knew when the Big Ten started all this with the conference only games, how all this would play out. And I really thought that once the Big Ten and the Pac-12 struck drew their line in the sand and saying we're going conference only, and when the Big 12, the ACC, and the SEC kind of waited to see what was going on, I really thought that best case scenario would be some kind of alliance between those three, where the non-conference would kind of be determined between those three. And then the ACC drew their line in the sand and worked it as brilliantly as I thought it was brilliant to use Notre Dame as dangling Notre Dame out there as leverage and convincing the Irish and NBC that this is a good thing to do, play for a conference championship, which is something Notre Dame never wants to do. But why not play for a conference championship for 1 year and see how it goes? And Notre Dame was convinced. And so John Swofford, the ACC commissioner, had his leverage and played it as brilliantly as he could. And then they did the 10-game conference schedule, and then
they still allowed
a +1
inside the in-state rivalries too.
The +1 to keep the in-state rivalries alive. And my guess is the SEC was ticked off as no get out.
That's probably the G
when that happened, and took all that away. We're going to go 10 games only in the SEC, and that's our plan. And I think there was a lot of steamed SEC officials, including Greg Sankey, when the ACC announced what they were going to do, and using that Notre Dame leverage. And the SEC did what they're supposed to do. They decided to go to the 10 conference games, and the SEC still exerts the most muscle in all this in college football, because you've got some really good matchups, which we'll talk about a little later. But now the ball's in the Big 12's court, and we'll talk a little later about what the options of the Big 12. But I want to keep with the ACC and the SEC theme. First of all, let's start with the ACC guys, because Okay, they drew the line in the sand and dangled Notre Dame. How do you think John Swofford was able to convince Notre Dame and NBC to do this for a year? Money?
Yeah, I mean, John
Large
has
check.
he wanted to do that just to make sure that to guarantee Notre Dame that they would get their 10 or 11 games, and then there's money.
Yeah, I want to see what the revenue division is with Notre Dame and NBC versus ACC and ACC Network. Is it where the parameters of the NBC contract are still intact with Notre Dame? You guys get to keep your NBC money, but when you play one of us, it's attached to what's going on with the ACC. And so I think that it completely has to do with revenue. But for me, I want to see what the division is with Notre Dame, NBC, and the ACC Network. I want to see what that division is. That to me is the big hook in all this.
Well, my thing is, I think any game that is played in South Bend is NBC money.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
that's my understanding too.
Anything that's played on the road is conference money. And if Notre Dame should make it in the championship game, I think it's a split. I think NBC gets a little of it. The game will still be on ESPN, but I think whatever proceeds Notre Dame gets out of that, I think NBC gets a little bit of a haul out of that. Although I thought it would be really good if NBC said we need to have that championship game, because at least it'd be on network television. I guess ABC does it on prime time, but that would have been a good catch for me if I was on the Notre Dame NBC end. Well, give us the ACC championship game. I don't think John Swofford would turn that down if that was a part of the negotiation. But to me, it is no coincidence that Clemson is on the schedule at Notre Dame for NBC.
Yeah.
Because when you look at Notre Dame's home games with this new structure, it's Clemson and Florida State.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's two ratings getters right there. Yeah. Louisville, see where the Cardinals are. They might be pretty decent.
Yeah.
Syracuse.
Yeah.
And Duke. You have the David Cutcliffe angle there. So that'll be a good storyline, but I'm not sure what Duke is going to be like. And it's not Krzyzewski versus Brian Kelly. Right. But I'm sure he'll be in the broadcast somewhere. So it's no coincidence that Clemson and Florida State are on that home schedule.
Well,
no doubt.
I'll put this out to the floor because I did a column this week on theonlinesportsguys.com talking about the nativism here in these Power 5 conference decisions. And one of the things that really jumped off the page to me is the conferences here all saying, well, we're going to keep this in-house because we want to be safe and consistent with our medical procedures and don't want to include any outside organizations in this. But what at the same time you're getting travel where you've got SEC schools having to travel out to Texas to College Station, Texas A&M. You've got ACC schools having to travel halfway across the country to go to Miami to play the University of Miami, instead of sticking to a more regionalized kind of schedule, which is something that Wilkie kind of touched on at the beginning of what he was talking about, where schools get to still play their in-state rivals. And why would you do this instead of having a regionalized schedule if you're a Power 5 conference and minimizing the amount of travel? Because the scope of not only the SEC and ACC, but the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the Pac-12 now runs from basically in the West from Seattle down to Arizona. In the ACC, it goes from Boston to Miami, and so on and so forth. You're talking still about a good amount of travel for teams that don't want to necessarily have their players interacting with anything other than themselves.
But I think what you can do, Phil, is in these conferences with these big money contracts, I think that what you could do is at least control travel internally. If it's a charter, it's a charter. Don't be surprised if you have a lot of charters going on with these Power 5 conferences this year. So I think that instead of putting everybody on an airplane, commercial, that whole thing, I think that you're probably in another situation where you can control travel. And I think that when you have schools that are getting $40+ million as a part of these contracts, I think that you could drop a couple $1 million to control your travel element in there. Not necessarily the travel cost. Wouldn't surprise me if you ended up getting a sponsor for that along those same lines to help defray that cost. But I think that when you're looking at these schools and these mega contracts, I think they can defray some of that cost, at least on the travel aspect, as much as I'd like to see them add aspect of it too.
Yeah, I don't think this was about safety of travel at all. I think this is about the Power Five conferences, seeing who's the biggest and the baddest of the five. And that's what it's come down to. And I think once the ACC drew their line in the sand of the three that had held out, once they did that, I think that all bets were off, because that really ticked off the SEC. I think the SEC wanted to somehow keep the in-state rivalries going between the two leagues. But when you dangle that Notre Dame carrot and maximize that, the SEC was stuck. They had to do something, and they did exactly what I expected to do. They're going to keep it in-house, and they're going to play 10 conference games. And when you look at the matchups in the SEC, they're still damn attractive throughout the season. And they're going to make their TV partners and their radio partners and everybody happy, and the fans happy, because every game is going to mean something. And I'm not so sure that's going to be the case in the ACC. Big 12, I got to see what their model is going to be, because there's a lot of different. There's like 4 different models that are being thrown out. One of them is a 12-game schedule. One of them is keeping everything as is. One of them is a 9-game conference-only schedule, like they do now, with a +1, which seems to be gaining some steam. There's a couple of others as well. But to me, this is not about safety and travel and whatever. This is about who's going to be the biggest and baddest, and it still remains the SEC because of how things have played out. But I'm interested to see what the Big 12 does, because I think they've got a little bit of leverage too, because they got some pretty attractive matchups as well.
Including Missouri State, right?
Against OU, yes. Bobby Petrino's debut.
In now less than 4 weeks.
In fact, practice starts Friday.
Well, let me ask you both this, and it's kind of a twofold question. One, assuming that they're able to play the season, which already all the, with the exception of the Big 12, everybody has already said that they're going to be starting later this year, which is something we really haven't gotten into yet either.
Yeah.
Is this the future of Power 5 conference college football? Is this what makes that transition that we've talked about so much over the years?
I think this is the first step in that. I think that this is, as Wilkie says, you have the Power 5 conferences laying out their own plans, going to do their own scheduling, and I think it might expand from here back in when you want to get into your 12-game schedules in figuring out how you want to finish all that stuff off. But I think that this is that first step to where you have the Power 5 separating away from the NCAA. And this is what we're seeing right now, is them taking matters into their own hands and securing as much revenue where the ACC is concerned, as much cachet as the ACC, bringing in keeping it in-house like we're seeing with the SEC. I think that this is the first step to them spinning off and away from the NCAA, finally, once and for all.
This smells to me like the SEC saying, hey, you need us. We don't need you. And we're going to see if that plays out in this football season, because if it does, and if their ratings are astronomical, which I pretty much guarantee that's what's going to happen, then we might see more of these in-conference models rather than playing outside of your conference. I can see a scenario, this is what made baseball unique. The American League and National Leagues were separate, and the only time you really saw the interaction was the All-Star game in the World Series. And, that could be a model in the future for the Power 5. And, I wouldn't discount the American trying to break into that and make it a Power 6 on down the road. because I think they've got the schools that could probably break through in that. So we're seeing, I think this is the first step, as John said to me, this is the first step as well as a brand new model, because the Power Five is already separated from the NCAA. The NCAA really has no authority other than maybe eligibility and stuff like that, the boring stuff. They have no authority over the Power Five pretty much. And this is an atomic thing going on. And they're going to have to figure out because the leadership vacuum is going to be huge if this keeps up.
Well, then let me ask you this, Wilkie, to your point. Right now we're seeing the SEC playing their 10-game schedule.
Right.
The ACC has everybody plus, or 10 plus Notre Dame. The Big 12 is still trying to figure it out if they did a 9+1. To get to 12-game schedules, do I dare even bring in the R word one more time?
Stone Cold! Stone Cold! That's me!
Reorganization, reclassification, rejiggerifying.
Yeah, and that's what I was getting at.
Do we get the conferences maxing themselves out that aren't quite to like the Big 12-10? Do they add 2 more? Do they add 3 more to get to that 12-game schedule? With the ACC, do they add 1 more and continue to have Notre Dame as a part of the mix? Are we seeing that as an element in all of this down the road?
Think about it this way. We've got 2 more years until most of the conference TV partnership deals are up contract-wise. The last time we saw a dramatic reshifting or restructuring of college football was the last time that TV contracts came up. So in theory, if we did this, we're talking about 2 years to kind of work out some kinks and see if it's something that's even viable. And then boom, it could be a thing and a way for them to ask for more money. Yeah, you're right. That's kind of what I'm thinking that they could do. What do you think, Wilkie?
I think if one league is vulnerable of all this breaking apart, it's the Pac-12. I think the Big 12 has kind of rescued itself, because we've always thought that's going to be the league that's going to break up. And obviously Texas is the Mac Daddy of that conference, but Oklahoma has been, to me, the better football school by far. And there's some really good football schools in that league. They could easily absorb the Arizona schools and the 2 LA schools, USC, UCLA, and I think that would be a very very formidable league. It's Oregon's going to be in Washington. They're going to be attractive to somebody. Do you bring the American in and absorb them into the American? I mean, because I think those schools in the American they're probably better than the Group of 5. They're definitely better than the average Group of 5, but they're just not there. They're kind of a tweener. They're just not there in Power 5. And I think if they could get a few schools into Power 5 leagues, I think that's what the model we may see, because I think there's some attractive schools in the American that would be attractive to a TV partner.
UCF.
And they're in major markets. UCF's in Orlando. That's a big TV market, and you get Tampa as well. I mean, that's how I look at it. I look at the TV market. You got Houston. If you're going to throw Temple in there, you got Philadelphia. So you got some really big time TV markets, and I think that's the attractive part of that league. And they play really, really good football, and they've been able to get some 5-stars to commit to some of their schools. So I think the gist of this all is when those TV contracts come up, everything is up for grabs, and a whole new model will happen. And I wouldn't be shocked if conferences decide to keep everything in-house and maybe have one non-conference game, which is probably against an FCS school, to fund their program and to get a cheap win, rather than traveling across country to play another big league, another Power 5 conference game.
To do a showcase game.
I mean, come on, everything's going to be up in the air when those TV contracts come up in what, 2023, 24, around there?
2 years.
2 years.
And for those of you listening to the podcast at home, we want to hear your thoughts. What do you think that's going to happen this year with college football? Is the change going to be permanent? Are we going to even play college football at all this year? Chime in with your thoughts on social media. You can find us at OSG Sports on Twitter, at OSG Sports on Facebook. We'd love to hear your inputs. We'll be posting these shows there along with YouTube, which if you're watching on video, there's a good chance you're probably watching this there. Let us know what you think. Guys, the other part of all this with the schedule announcements were everybody's kind of staggered with their starts, assuming that they play college football this year. We've got games starting at anywhere from August 29th through late September this year. And as college students, some college campuses start welcoming and allowing students back to campus, are we going to see outbreaks where we're seeing, like right now, where a lot of the virus issues have become kids in people in the 18 to 34 age group, and college kids kind of congregating? It's helped some of these universities that right now they've been on campus by themselves, just working out and kind of getting their voluntary workouts in before students come back. But how do you control kids at this level and keep them away from the general public with something so infectious? And do you think this is something that might still be derailing the season, or is that extra time going to help? It's a long question, isn't it?
But I think once again it comes down to the individual athletic departments and how you monitor your student athletes and taking personal responsibility. And once again, it's stuff like this when you're out in public, protecting everyone else from you, and looking at all of the medical data and trying to discern where contact can be. And I think football is probably going to look a little different with social distancing. I've seen ideas about rule changes on the field where you are maybe expanding your sidelines to the 10s, to where you have folks hanging out and standing around waiting for their chance to go out on the field. I think the coin toss is going to look different. I think that when you come into monitoring and sanitizing locker rooms and minimizing that kind of interaction, I think that there are ways that you can monitor what's going on and you can control what you can control. But the bottom line for me is just personal responsibility with the student athlete from Sunday through Friday, in addition to what you're doing with your athletic departments. And so I think it's the big responsibility. I know that we've had the testing discussion before and all those kinds of things, but putting the testing element aside, I think that it comes down to just making sure that you're taking all of the precautions as an individual, but at the same time, athletically minimizing those instances where you would be together as a group inside of social distancing guidelines and things like that.
Wilkie, how do you tell a 20-year-old not to go to a campus party?
You don't. I mean, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And, I mean, you're going to have to rely on individual responsibility on this one for it to be successful, and keep pounding masks and so forth. But the couple of things I want to see, obviously, when teams were coming back to campus in June, and we saw the big outbreaks at Clemson and at LSU that was reported. I think Alabama was one there. Has a herd immunity set in on some of these schools that had the early outbreaks? And, there's been constant testing at university athletic programs. And some of the numbers are encouraging. We know Rutgers had a major outbreak, as well as Michigan State, where they had shut down things. Those are out there. I'm just curious to see as things progress, as we get into training camps, when you're kind of in that bubble, what the numbers are going to be. The other thing is I'm really curious about, John, you brought up some really good points about in-game experience and so forth. What's going to happen when the final gun sounds and the players are leaving the field? Because they always huddle together and do the post-game handshakes. And I know it's going to be discouraged, but guys, it is ingrained in these kids that after the game, you walk over there and shake their hands. And, I don't think it's going to
send them out different exits. That's what you can do.
Well, I mean, how are you going to police that? Look, I've been to many travel tournaments this summer where that has happened after games because it's just automatic. And mom and dad's, a few of them just going apoplectic over it. And
you don't even think about it.
You don't think about it, and they're going to do it. And what do? Do you have armed personnel out there blocking the two teams? I mean, this is going to get really weird. John and I are huge hockey fans. I don't feel you are too. I saw Gary Bettman talking about the handshake line during the playoffs. How are you going to police that? And he goes, well, maybe it'll be an elbow line. I don't know.
Yeah.
These are things you don't think about that are going to happen. And that's what I'm curious about. And I don't know if how they're going to react when the game is over, the final gun, and the two coaches just automatically go out there and shake their hands, and the players go out there and people are going to be offended by that. That is something that I'm just curious to see what happens.
Yeah, I've seen one of the things you made me think about when you said that is as Major League Baseball's come back, one of the things I've noticed watching my beloved Atlanta Braves on TV, particularly here over the last couple of days, is after a good play happens or a player hits a home run, they come into the dugout and now it's air high fives. They don't actually make contact with anybody, but it's like, and then
what are you going to do when a player scores a touchdown?
Yeah.
I mean, you huddle around them and you pat them on the backside and you slap them on the side of the head. Is that going to be discouraged? There are innate things that we do to celebrate that we just do automatically. It's ingrained in our systems, and it's going to be someone's going to be back. Is there going to be someone on the staff that's going to run out there and tackle your teammate so you don't go and celebrate? I mean, these are things you got to think of. And if somebody's watching at home thinking, how can they let them do that? I mean, we're going to have some outside forces that are going to. There's some outside things I'm trying to think about how to phrase this, that are going to be offended by what they're seeing in a celebratory fashion. So have these things been thought out is my thing, because I'm seeing these travel tournaments, moms and dads, and it's been a small number going absolutely apoplectic on a handshake line. I saw an umpire prevent a coach from walking out to the mound to talk to his pitcher because of the COVID concerns. So those are extreme cases, but things you got to think about. And Phil, if you don't mind, I'd like to bring up the staggered starts, because this was something that was in college football years ago when we were in school. You'd have guys starting. There was really no, September 1st, I guess, was probably, or maybe August something.
Yeah, Labor Day weekend.
Because I remember one year Oklahoma, when they were rolling with Jamal Holloway, didn't start the season until the last week of September, and even had an off week. But to me, it's nothing new. This is kind of what college football was 20, 30 years ago, back when we remember it in our youth. But with the SEC starting September 26th, to me, that gives the Big 12, if they're going to start early, a huge opportunity to get their name out there as far as recognition in the college football world. But then you look at the Pac-12. They're going to start September 26th. And boy, you talk about shooting your wad right out of the gate. Arizona and Arizona State and UCLA, USC, your marquee rivalry being played at week 1, USC, UCLA.
Got to do something.
I think it's going to be overshadowed by the SEC games.
No doubt.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Guys, what do you say we wrap it up here in the first block of the show? We've been going for a good half hour, believe it or not, or pretty close to it. Want to do my due diligence here and remind those of you at home or those of you watching here on YouTube or listening, you can download our phone app. That's right. We have a phone app. It's OSG Sports. It's free, and you can find it on Google Play, or, John, because you can't do this, I'm going to do it for you.
Attaboy.
On the iTunes Store.
Attaboy, Count Floyd. Nicely done.
Or the Apple Store. I guess it's not really the iTunes Store anymore. But I'll do the Dr. Tongue stuff here.
Would you like some more pancakes?
Download the OSG Sports app now. It's free. Guys, when we come back, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of other things going on this week, including the passing of, at the age of 31, one of the up-and-comers in the college football coaching ranks. Some Pac-12 players trying to make some demands of the Pac-12, which kind of rolls a little bit into what we just talked about. That and more when we come back in the second half of the review. You're listening to the review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
The online sports guys would love to hear from you. Go to our Twitter page at OSG Sports for a comment, rant, or just whatever's on your mind about college football.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency, or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
What's the matter, Colonel Sanders? Chicken?
Thanks for sticking around, everybody. You have made it through the halftime part of the review. This is the OSG Sports College Football Show. We are the online sports guys, and we're talking college football here on our podcast, The Review, of course. Have I said that enough, guys?
You have?
No.
Yeah. Look, I see John is back on the road, and he's passing through Auburn right now, so turn to your right and wave to Coach Malzahn.
Actually, since I'm heading northbound, it would be turning to my left, so it would be
Either or. Either or.
Hi, Gus.
If I turn to the right, though, I'm not staring at campus. That's the problem. I have to turn to my left and wave. If I do that, I'm waving at like hotels and auto dealerships and things. It's not.
Well, keep your eyes open. There's probably a Bruce Pearl sighting coming up.
Yep. He'll make a cameo.
Drill. Guys, this is our news, notes, and nuggets and things left unsaid segment. Some stuff going on here in the world of college football that isn't COVID related for the most part. Want to touch really quick, and this ties a little bit to what we talked about in the first half of the show. An interesting letter circulating from the Pac-12 football players threatening the conference to not play this season unless a long list of, well, I don't know how long, but a certain list of demands is made that accommodates the players and allows them the ability to have their issues addressed by the conference. And quite honestly, one of the biggest issues is the fact that they're asking for some money.
Interesting.
Some of it is the player safety. Some of it is racial injustice. Some of it is the likeness, the image and likeness. But a lot of it is having to do with paper performance. Some of the income coming back to the players. as I do a little dive through here, some of the conference revenue being distributed out to players, fair market rights, those kind of things. It's all the things that we've talked about in the last 12 years of podcasting about such things with college athletics. I just think in the times that we're living in, these Pac-12 players kind of feel like they've got some leverage, and they're going to use it as much. I find it interesting, among their demands is that Larry Scott, the commissioner of the Pac-12, as well as administrators and coaches, voluntarily and drastically reduced their excessive pay. Larry Scott's is the highest paid commissioner in the Power Five.
Which is ironic, being in the weakest of the conferences in the Power Five, but that's a whole other issue.
And that they've had to go to private equity firms to try to raise revenue just so they can operate properly.
And your offices are in one of the most high rent districts of San Francisco, and your rent is nowhere near what the SEC pays for rent in Birmingham, and what the ACC pays in Greensboro. I'm not sure if that's rent or not, but we'll see. And the other demands was that Stanford reinstate all the sports that they dropped.
That's not going to happen.
And that their $27.7 billion endowment goes, some of that goes toward athletics. Problem with that is athletic departments and universities are two separate entities.
Yeah.
And endowment money cannot be used for athletic, public, private. So let's see how that's going to, how that issue is going to be resolved. The thing about the paying for players, and it's something we've touched on, I just don't know if 18 to 21, 22-year-olds realize that income tax comes into play then.
No.
And you're going to have to file a personal income tax, and whatever you make, it's going to be taxed.
Well, then would they not be 1099, which would mean they would be responsible for their full taxable value and not just 1040s, where taxes are taken out and sent to other things to help defray those things? I think they'd be 1099ers.
Yeah, they'd probably be 1099ers. It would also mean that they would have to file in. If you're a Pac-12 player and you're playing Arizona and Arizona State, you're in Tucson and Tempe, you got to
single state you play.
You got to pay state income tax in Washington and in Oregon, in Arizona, and in Utah. And if you, let's say you fly out to play NC State, you got to play it in North Carolina. I don't think they understand that aspect of it all. So while these lists of demands are lengthy and so forth, so there's a lot of issues there that they're going to bring up that I don't think they want.
Yeah. No, there's a couple of cans of worms there that don't need to be opened up. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And on one hand, it's good on them for trying to organize and being aware of the fact that they do have a voice in some of the things that are going on with them, what they do and how they do it. But like Wilkie said, there's a few things in there. Be careful what you ask for. It may not be everything you thought it would be. Got to come kind of circle off to a different subject here. Some news out of Lafayette, Louisiana this weekend. Raging Cajun assistant coach, offensive line coach DJ Looney passed away at the age of 31 of a heart attack during a team workout this weekend.
Yeah, saw that.
Horrible news. And Looney is somebody who, by many accounts, was an up-and-comer in the college football coaching ranks. He was only 31, but he had already had time at multiple universities, including Mississippi State, Georgia, Louisiana. You hate to hear stuff like this, especially for somebody so young.
No doubt. And obviously, deepest love to everybody who's attached to the Louisiana program. But he was one of those up-and-coming coaches, and everything that has been read and written about is that he was loved by student athletes, loved by assistant coaches, loved by the coaches that he coached under, and it is just an absolute shame that someone like that is taken from us so young.
And he really sounded like a good dude, loved by his players, everything. Before, I know John just passed through Auburn, but I'll throw this one out to Wilkie here to talk about a little bit real quickly too. News out of Alabama this weekend that the notorious Harvey Updike has passed away at the age of 71. If you wonder who Updike is, he is the guy who was convicted of poisoning the tree at Toomer's Corner. Is that the way you want to be remembered in life? As somebody who did something like that? I'm laughing. I shouldn't be laughing about somebody passing away.
But that's how he's going to be remembered. He's going to be remembered as a pariah for an entire conference and attached to one school and attached to a rivalry, and how fandom and fanaticism can go completely and totally off the rails. And it was unfathomable what he did. It was disgusting. And he, in the restitution, I believe he only came up with about 10% of the restitution that he was supposed to help. Wasn't even that much?
7,000 out of 800.
Yeah,
okay. So it was so less than 1%.
Like $6,000. Yeah, it was. It wasn't even a dip in the pool.
Yeah.
So I had my decimal place over.
One phone call to Paul Feinbaum's show, even before he went national, and this all blew up into the ultimate rage of fandom is killing the trees in Toomer's Corner. It's brazen. It was stupid. It is the red letter on his life. And unfortunately, he passed away. I'm sure he was a great man to his family, but he was definitely Crimson Tide red, bled through those veins, and it was tragic how his fandom was. So, our condolences to the Updike family, but he's going to be known as the guy that killed the trees.
On to a little bit better news here. This weekend, Texas quarterback Sam Ehlinger let everybody know that the COVID-19 relief fund that he started back in late March has passed the $200,000 mark.
Nice. Good stuff.
Ehlinger had started a GoFundMe account to try to help people out, those in need, through the food bank out there in Texas, the Boys and Girls Club, the Pets Alive group, a whole bunch of groups that jumped in on this. This is, to me, and I've said this before, this is what I love about college athletes who get it and realize that they can make a difference in their community. And the fact that the NCAA actually let them do it is an even bigger deal.
That to me is the biggest element in all of this, is that when the NCAA, as toothless as they are, let individuals who care, when they leave them to their own devices and let them do things for the public good, you see what people like Sam Ehlinger do. Instead of trying to micromanage everything, e.g. Trevor Lawrence and Ehlinger, and just if you just take something in its proper context, you understand what an individual's trying to do, let them do it, kind of keep an eye on it just to make sure everything's on the up and up. But when you have individuals who want to step forward and do fantastic things for communities, for causes and things like that, don't get wrapped up in the idea that this is a student athlete trying to do something. Get engaged in the notion that this is a human being who wants to help out other human beings. And for Ehlinger to get to this point, I think it's tremendous.
Yeah, for a child of the Southwest Conference as myself, who was born and raised to loathe the burnt orange and white and the hook 'em horns, Sam Ehlinger Sam Ehlinger has now made it where I have to root for Texas. I mean, that is phenomenal. I concur with everything John said. When kids get it right, they get it right. And Sam Ehlinger and Trevor Lawrence are two fine college quarterbacks that has got it right, and each with their own shade of orange. Damn you, Sam Ehlinger! I gotta like Texas now. Oh my God!
No, you just have to like Sam Ehlinger. You don't have to like Texas. You just have to like Sam Ehlinger as a human being.
But he wears the burnt orange and white.
only on Saturday afternoon.
True.
That is true.
And Arkansas is not on the schedule, so
there you go.
Last thing I want to hit on before we wrap things up here on this week's episode of the review. I found this interesting. Wilkie said that he's not the only one who's done it, and I'm sure he's not. Harvard running back Devin Darrington announced this week he's leaving Harvard and entering the transfer portal because the Ivy League had announced that they were postponing their college football season.
Yeah.
According to College Football Talk, at least 8 players from the Ivy League have done this, and I just find this fascinating that guys are even thinking about it, and 2 that's kind of what we're able to do now in the college football.
Well, you've got you've got FCS schools that are canceling their seasons. The Colonial League, Colonial Athletic Association, a few others. And some of those athletes are looking for homes and places to play, and they're looking in the Power 5, Group of 5 level, and for those opportunities. And there's some opportunities for those guys out there. For Devin Darrington, I mean, he looks like he's central casting to be at a Duke, at a Wake Forest, at a Boston College. Be walking across the street to go to Boston College. When I look at his makeup, he's a guy that can looks like he can move the line and get you a key first down. And those are valuable commodities in college football right now, especially when you got to get first downs in short yardage situations. When I was looking at his photo, I tell you, the first person that popped in my mind, and this goes way back to our youth, and he was an Ivy League guy that had a really good NFL career, and that's Mark Van Egan. I mean, think about him with the Raiders. Colgate guy. I think it was Colgate. I know he's one of the Ivy League schools, but
big bruising fullback.
Big bruising fullback.
I was thinking of Ed Marinero.
Ed Marinero was another one. Yeah. He looked more like a Van Egan type with the huge shoulders and the leg drive, but that's the first person I thought about. But no, to me, this is not uncommon. You're going to see some FCS guys who have had, have put some stripes down, trying to get a job in the bigger ranks.
Yeah, and I want to ask you both a question. I didn't really get to this earlier. What is all this stuff with the Power 5 conferences? We talked about what they're doing and how they approach the season. We really haven't heard from the Group of 5. The last question out here that we can discuss in the show before we wrap things up: what are the Sun Belts and the Conference USAs and the Mountain Wests? What are they going to do this year?
Their own thing, because they don't have any choice. I think that and I think this is going to be a trickle down. I think that when you have the Power 5s figure out what they're going to do, I think that you're going to have the Go 5s figure out what they're going to do. But they can't flinch because they don't know if any of their non-conference games are going to be a part of their schedules. Until each of the schools that are tied to each of these conferences, where you'd have a payday game, when it's finally figured out, then I think as a unit, then you all move forward. You play your own schedules. But I mean, we've talked about before where we should have had, the Southern mix, the Sun Belt mix it up with the American and have a mega regionalized schedule. And I think that that's what you should have done with your crossovers and things like that outside of conference. Either go fully conference or go fully conference with a plus couple, and then have your crossovers, or just blow it all up and go completely regional to trim your travel costs, because you know that travel costs traditionally this year are going to be part of your negative budget. So I just think it's a trickle down that we're all waiting to figure out.
Okay, I'll try to be brief, but I got a lot to say about this. First of all, the one thing we didn't touch on the first block was about the conference championship games being played later in December, and that tells me there's not going to be a bowl season, and that's really going to affect the group of 5 team players, the schools, because that's another source of revenue for those schools to be able to play in those, quote, ESPN bowl games and get some TV exposure.
Well, not if you're Indiana, who owe money to that.
Well, I think the group of 5s probably don't have the cost like that. Okay, so what does the group of 5 do? John, I think your model is perfect, but I think I would look at this as opportunity. I would look at this as, okay, you want to play a conference-only schedule, play a conference-only schedule, but explore the possibility of having your own championship playoff, perhaps. Yeah. This is the time to do it. I'm sure there is a TV network out there that sees this valuable, a cable network, whatever, that sees some value in this. And so if you play a conference-only schedule, then why not have somebody bankroll a 16-team playoff between the group of 5 schools and see where it gets you? Well, I think this is your time.
If ESPN Events doesn't get their bowl games that are early on,
I don't think they're going to happen.
Then that's what ESPN does, is they take those early ESPN Events bowl games, turn it into the 16-team playoff amongst the group of 5s, and that makes up for not having that programming.
The one complicated thing about that is that the group of 5 is guaranteed a spot in the New Year's Six. I don't know what the New Year's Six bowl status is. But with the late championship games within the conferences, that tells me that the bowl season is pretty much done, and I'm not sure if we're going to ever see it again. To be honest with you, I think this might be the end of bowls, and so that's why I think if you're a group of 5 school, this is the time to explore that possibility. You've got a month to see if there's any interest at all in doing something like this. And I've always thought that the group of 5 may have a little leverage to at least get it on cable, a 16-team playoff, and I think they would generate some interest, especially when you got schools like UCF and Houston and some good fan bases in the Mountain West. That just really don't have anything to play for. This is a chance for you to play for. You can't play for a national championship because you're just not going to break into the college football playoff. So have your own national championship and see what happens.
All right, guys, time to wrap it up here. We have made it through the home stretch. For those of you listening on the podcast, you have probably found us either by the link in Spreaker. You can find us on Stitcher. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us at the Apple Store, Google Play, pretty much anywhere that hosts podcasts in a group setting. There's a pretty good chance we're there. Just look us up, OSG Sports. I told you earlier in the show, you can find us on social media at OSG Sports as well. Real easy to remember that. Of course, there's the website, theyoungsportsguys.com. And then there's Zingo.tv, which John won't be able to show you this week, but it's a TV app based out of Canada. We run there every Wednesday and Friday. That is when I remember to send the show. 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Wednesday. I'm not exactly sure what the time is on Thursday or Friday, but it runs a couple times over the course of the week. And you're watching us on if you're not watching us there, you're watching us on YouTube. This is the video version of the audio podcast for those of you who are totally confused like me. Guys, time to say goodbye. For OSG Nelson, for Jay Wilkerson 16, I am OSG Phil. We are the Online Sports Guys. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a wonderful week. I'm sure we're going to have a whole lot more to talk about again next week. Bye-bye.